And specifically, I really want to work with parents and help them use this as a tool to not just become more embodied in their own authentic self, but create a safe space for their children to grow up in a way that is more true to their kind of nature, instead of feeling like they have to fit these molds or live up to these expectations.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Pelvic Pulse podcast. Ooh, this is going to be a good one. I'm sitting with Alexandra, who is a former corporate consultant turned human design coach. After a decade of helping Fortune 500s identify and articulate their why, she pivoted to help individuals, families, and couples do the same. She uses human design as a tool to help her clients pursue their purpose with more clarity and confidence. Love it. Alexandra is passionate about translating insights from her clients' human design charts into actionable strategies for optimizing their relationships, well-being, careers, finances, and family life. Alexandra was born in London, raised in Amsterdam, educated at Princeton University, and now lives in Santa Barbara, California, with her husband and 2 kids. Becoming a mother inspired her to create Thriving by Design, a collection of tools, cheat sheets, and online courses designed to give parents insight into their child's unique sensitivities, preferences, and gifts, as well as tactical tips for how to support them. Alexandra is happiest when moving her body, eating good food, exploring new places, and in deep conversation with new or old friends. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. That's a mouthful. And it's hard to sit through something like that where you're like, oof, I don't like hearing this about myself.
But it's like all true. And
Yes, and the deep conversations, that's why we're here, right? So I'm very
yes,
excited and grateful that you have brought me on to speak to your amazing audience and community.
thank you. I'm so grateful that you're here. We got connected, just to let everyone in on some background, through a friend, a mutual friend, Sam Harvey. Shout out, Sam Harvey. And her and I were just talking about human design and how in my work, I feel like I'm working with the embodied mother, or at least a woman who wants to become an embodied mother. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And then I feel like, for me at least, my curiosity and my interest with human design, of course, started with myself and my own experiment. But I have a very big curiosity about how that can play out in parenthood and what my kid will be like and how I
Mm-hmm.
can best serve them. And just we'll see how it goes. But you are someone who's already doing that.
Attempting to.
You're living the experiment. Yeah.
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 Yep.
And I just find it so fascinating. I don't know if people fully understand what it is. We don't necessarily have to get into the background and deep, like, where did this come from? Conversation, because I feel like what's important is to maybe hear about these takeaways. I want to hear about your story and how you got into it and how you apply it in your life. And yeah, maybe we can start with that. Yeah, how did human design enter your life, I guess? I'm just curious.
I'll try and tell you the abbreviated version. But kind of going back, I think I was always someone who had a curiosity about just, I want to call, I'm going to loop it all together in like just spiritual modalities and the more spiritual and I think embodied practices that support that spiritual work. I was always curious about those things. And yet I was told and taught and conditioned to prioritize the more like logical mind and pursuits as the path to, professional success, if you will. And so I went to an amazing school. And when I graduated from that school, I actually only considered 2 paths. I was either going to be a consultant or I was going to go into financial services, because those were the 2 paths that would inevitably lead me to be successful. And I kind of describe it as following this yellow brick road that was almost already laid out for me. And all I had to do was take the next right step, quote unquote. And so I was doing that. And then at one point, I was about 3 years into my job as a management consultant, living in New York City, working these like 16-hour days, and basically surviving on cereal. I would have cereal for 3 meals a day. Um, and a close friend of mine came back from being abroad, and she told me over drinks about this kind of idea she had for a company. And I got so excited about this vision and this concept, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I started meeting her before work and after work and on the weekends, and just brainstorming what this company could be. And a few months into that, she asked me, well, would you ever consider leaving your job and starting this with me? And I thought about it maybe for a week, but from the moment she asked the question, I knew it was going to be like a yes. And it didn't make any sense, literally 0 sense. We had no clients, we had no track record, we had no funding. I had actually at the time, because I'm Dutch originally, I had a visa connected to my current employer. And so it was a very, on paper, stupid decision, but I did it anyway. And it was only a few months after that I really paused and reflected on, oh my goodness, what did I just do? I completely tore apart that very safe, predictable path that was inevitably going to lead me to, quote unquote, again, success. And I started going on a little bit of a personal development journey to almost explain that to myself. Like, what happened and why was I so confident that this was the right decision in that moment, even though it didn't make any sense. And I'd always been someone who did what made sense. So I explored a few different things. And one of those things that came on my path at that point was human design. And it was the first modality or medium, if you will, or tool that really brought together the kind of the spiritual side of things, as well as this very practical insight into how I personally was designed to operate in the most effective way. Because really what human design is it's just a roadmap to how an individual is designed to use their unique one-of-a-kind energy in the way that is going to get them the greatest return on that investment in terms of fulfillment and purpose and aliveness, essentially. And it perfectly explained why I had made that jump and why it felt like such a no-brainer and why I was so much more energized and fulfilled on the other side of that jump. And so I just started kind of learning about human design, mostly for my own personal interests at first. And then naturally, the things that I really love, and you also see this back in my human design chart, I can't help but talk about with everyone else. So at every dinner table, I was like, oh my goodness, I need to look up your human design. And then a few years later, I got to a point in that business where I was getting a little burnt out. And again, now I can tell you exactly why I was burnt out based on human design, but I was getting to that point and I knew I needed to step away. And so I took a little sabbatical. And I say little because it was really only 4 or 5 weeks. And my husband and I went to Bali. And during that time, I kind of went, really deep into human design. I took a certification program to become a reader, not really knowing what I would do with it, but I just knew that I really wanted to immerse myself in this tool more fully. And so that was January 2020. So we came back, and 2 weeks later, the entire world shut down. And suddenly I had all this extra time because I wasn't traveling. And I had this new skill set because I actually felt more confident in my ability to kind of help and support people with this tool. And so I just started building this little side gig where I would, do one-on-one sessions with people and explain their charts. And kind of, I would at the time still write out tons of notes. I think there was like 3 hours of preparation for every 1 hour session. But I think because it was this like beautiful period of time where I didn't have kids yet, because of COVID, we just were so much more isolated, and we had all this time suddenly to really pursue things that lit us up. And I never really had that before, that spaciousness. And so that's kind of what I think kicked this off. Started that side gig. And then a year later, I had my son. And let me tell you, when you have a child, and if you were ever on kind of a little skeptical about human design, once you have a kid, you will be 1000% in, because seeing their human design chart, so their energetic makeup and the way that they are designed to move through the world in that most effortless and impactful way, is like looking, you are seeing it play out in real time, because children are these deconditioned beings. They don't necessarily at that age, at that young age, have to be anything that they're not yet. They don't feel that external pressure to be something else. And so you get to see that like real raw version of them. And it makes you realize, oh my goodness, like how far am I from that real raw version of myself? But that's really, I think, the moment where I was like, okay, I'm all in on this thing. And specifically, I really want to work with parents and help them use this as a tool to not just become more embodied in their own authentic self, but create a safe space for their children to grow up in a way that is more true to their kind of nature, instead of feeling like they have to fit these molds or live up to these expectations.
Oh my goodness, Alexandra. Ah, it's just making me think. Thank you for sharing all of that.
It was a long-winded answer to a very simple
I
question.
know, but you just touched on so many good points there. Just like I can see myself in your story a bit. Leaving a job, not really knowing why, but kind of, yeah, you
Trusting
semi
it.
understand. Yeah, you understand and you trust it. And then maybe get some validation after the fact. But yeah, even just thinking about my childhood, and I'm a projector, splenic projector 2/4. And my younger brother is also a projector. And our parents are generators, man gens. And I just remember growing up, and even sometimes now into adulthood, it's a lot less, and we get on great, my whole family. But um, back then it was always, what's next? What are you going to do? The feeling of being lazy and not doing
Mm-hmm.
enough was so ingrained. And like you were
Yeah.
talking about just now with the deconditioning, or how a child is not conditioned whatsoever until maybe they're a little bit older, and you just take on all this stuff. And it was a hard learning process over, at least for me, the past 7 years, because I think I've known about human design for 7 years.
Yeah.
Still on that deconditioning journey.
Well, and your example, it like shows you how no one's doing anything wrong, right? Your parents aren't
Totally.
intentionally trying to put pressure on you, but they don't understand that the way you are designed to be most effective is not by doing a ton of stuff. It's actually by figuring out what are the few things that she is very just naturally gifted at, and how can we support her in going really deep in those things, and giving her enough time to rest and recharge in between those like bursts of sharing her gifts, in order for her to be able to sustain that. Because they had this built-in motor as generator manifesting generators, where like they didn't really, if they were working on the right things, they never really knew what it felt like to be tired, in the sense of the tiredness that feels like overwhelming and difficult. They knew what it felt like to feel like exhausted in a satisfying way, because at the end of the day, if they have used up every ounce of energy, that's the most satisfying thing to a generator and manifesting generator. They sleep really well, because guess what? They wake up naturally with a full tank of energy again.
Mm.
Whereas you don't necessarily have that. So when you deplete everything, you might already intuit like, okay, I'm going to be down for the count for the next few days, right? And you're still trying to make up for that, like your energy drain, if you will, because you don't have that same motor that they have, or it doesn't work in the same way.
Right, right. And I feel like someone could probably hear that and be like, well, what's so good about being a projector? I feel like this is something I talk to a lot of my friends about, because I'm kind of like you. I'm like dipping my toes in, or how you were back then, checking on people's charts and stuff and giving them some feedback, maybe in regards to their business or something like that. And someone's like, is that bad if I'm a blah, 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 blah? And I'm like, no, nothing is bad. Nothing is good. It is what it is. Everything is so neutral. But I just do find it so curious and so amazing how differentiated we all are. And so, yeah, one projector isn't going to be the same as another projector. One generator is not going to be the same as another generator. But maybe will you share what you are? And
Mhm.
yeah, so curious how, like, what did you notice about your son that made you kind of like light bulb? Because my first instinct actually was to go and ask about sleeping and
Yeah.
for like babies and sleep training and all this stuff that parents really get in the mud with sometimes,
Yep.
and how to manage that as like whatever energy type you are or whatever your design is, and then what your child is. I can only imagine how
Yeah.
complicated it can get, but
So maybe I'll start with the most simple piece. So what I can do is I'll kind of talk about very briefly the energy types, but maybe I'll touch on what it looks like in a child and also kind of where sleep comes into play and how to support your child in the way that's most optimal for their design.
got it.
Because
Perfect.
I think first and foremost, part of why I think sometimes projectors are like, oh, I don't want to be a projector. Everyone has a reaction to their design. Okay. So, and what we're talking about here, by the way, energy is an energy type. And I oftentimes refer to the energy type as like the outer layer of the onion. Like if you think of your human design and when you look up your chart, it looks very complex.
Mhm.
And that's because humans are complex. Like you want there to be all these nuances. But essentially, that chart is like an onion with so many layers to unpack. And that's why it can take, even after years of studying it, like you already alluded to, there's still more to learn. But the first layer, like that outer layer that you have to unpack in order to get to all of the other more juicy, nuanced stuff is energy type. And energy type, there's 5 different energy types. And really what it describes is just the fundamental mechanics of the way your energy works. It doesn't really say anything about your personality or really like your more individual gifts. It just speaks purely to how to invest your energy in the way that is going to feel most rewarding and supportive for you specifically. So there's these 5 types. I'll start with generators and manifesting generators, because together that group makes up about 70% of the population. So this is the majority. And generators and manifesting generators, per your parents, are here to really be the motors of society. They have a very consistent type of energy where they usually wake up with this, like I said, full tank, and they're just designed to burn through that tank of energy in a very consistent way throughout the day. And then when that tank is empty, they go to sleep. And guess what? They wake up with a full tank of energy again. But they are really here to be like, again, the generators of life force energy. They are here to pursue the things that light them up and excite them, because when they do, they create energy, not just for themselves, but for everyone else around them. So in an ideal world, a generator is purely, and a manifesting generator are purely following the joy there. And that's all tied up to their gut center, their sacral center, which is where our desires and our needs and our joy live. And so that's the thing, as a generator or manifesting generator, you're trying to tune into and respond to. You're really moving through life in response to what lights my gut up, basically. So this particular type in children are usually children who have a lot of energy, specifically manifesting generators. What makes them slightly different is that they move even quicker than generators. They're just all over the place and they're making connections incredibly quickly. And I almost call them like the honeybees a lot of the time, where it's like they're really meant to fly from flower to flower and cross-pollinate as they go. They're not meant to stick to one flower, because they will get so bored. Like variety is so key for these manifesting generators. So if we think about this kind of translated to kids, both generator and manifesting generator children are going to be pretty consistent, high energy, generally kids. They can keep up with everything. They can do a bunch of extracurriculars. They're kids who, when we talk about sleep, when they're done, when their battery is empty, they'll just like put their head on the table and fall asleep. They just like conk out. And they're really meant to be super attuned to their bodies, and they usually are, right? Because that sacral center, that gut, is the name of the game. And they feel that even as kids. They're very attuned to knowing like what they want, what they need, when enough is enough. That's all very intuitive to them. Manifesting generator kids are going to be kids that oftentimes get this. If I think about like the correlation, and this is just anecdotally, okay, so don't come at me, the mom police, but when you think about a diagnosis like ADHD, I think there is a very high correlation with kids who are manifesting generators because they naturally just move very quickly. And so it seems like they're distracted, but really they're just taking it all in, and they can make connections incredibly quickly, and they get bored very quickly. And they need a lot of stimulation. And so in kids, again, that means that they're going to be playing with a toy for like, my son is a manifesting generator. When we go on a trip, I have to assume that we're going to need a new activity for like every 10 minutes. Whereas if I was, and I'll cover projectors in a moment, but traveling with my daughter, she's very young now, but once she grows up, she's a projector like you. She could probably work on something for an hour and be solid and fine and happy. Mm-hmm. And so you need that variety. Also, when it comes to sleep, it's really important that generators and manifesting generators are able to really tap all of that energy in a satisfying way, ideally, before they go to sleep. Because if they still have some energy left in the tank, it's going to be really difficult for them to find sleep. So what you hear a lot is don't get your child too excited or riled up before bed, because that's going to mess with their, ability to kind of prime down, if you will, prime the system down. For manifesting generators and generators, actually, you may even want to ramp up the activity and the excitement before bed. So with my son, I regularly set up in his bedroom obstacle courses. If I notice that he still had some energy in the tank, I'm like, okay, we're going to jump up now. We're going to do this. Or I take him outside and I have him run laps. And so it goes against all of that advice, but it really makes him fall asleep so much more effectively than, especially on days where he hasn't really been outside because it's raining and he hasn't gotten to use his body as much or be as physical. He finds it much harder to fall asleep on those nights.
I could totally see that. I'm almost envisioning, even I sometimes though will get the zoomies right before bed. But I know a lot of kids, a lot of even pets and human adults are having little zoomies right before bed. And I wonder how many of them are actually generator types.
Probably a lot of them. And what's interesting is, so a part of the difference between these generator and manifesting generator types and the other three types that I'm about to cover, which are projectors, manifestors, and reflectors, is that, like I said, generators and manifesting generators, they are much more attuned to their own energy. They know when that battery is dead and needs to recharge, and they are almost like in charge of that, essentially. Whereas the other three types, for you, your energy is very dependent on environment. And so you are much more sensitive to that stimulation from outside, and that's going to have a much bigger impact on you, and almost kind of trick you into thinking oh, I still have a ton of energy. And then you have a much harder time actually knowing how exhausted you are because your environment is influencing you and biasing you in a way. So let's move to projectors. So where generators are here to kind of, be those motors, those energizers, and to follow their passions and do what they love. And with that, they really are here to kind of create energy. Projectors are here to guide energy. Projectors are here to bring efficiency and to optimize processes, systems, people. Really, projectors are the seers. They are the people who can look at things in a way or see the world in a way that other people can't see it. They immediately identify what can be improved, what needs to be tweaked in order for things to function more smoothly or more optimally. If generators are like the Energizer bunny, I often refer to projectors as the optimizer bunnies. And projectors are able to really do their best work when they are able to focus and go deep with one thing or one person at a time. That's where a projector really shines. Projectors usually have certain things that they are just naturally very gifted at. And in an ideal world, a projector is really tuning into what are the things that are most easeful and effortless to me. That's the stuff that projectors are really meant to do and share with others. Projector energy ebbs and flows, so it is not as consistent. And like I said, it's very sensitive and informed by environment. So projectors, once they have given their all to something for a short burst of time, let's say, it's really important for projectors to be able to pull back and rest and reset and recharge. And that ebb and flow is really important to embrace as a projector, because if you keep pushing yourself to be consistently outputting, like the generators and manifesting generators, you are inevitably going to burn out. Because part of your magic can only really come online when you have a little bit of space, when you're able to look at things from a little bit of a distance and observe and see opportunities, see inefficiencies. And when you're up in the mix, just going, pushing things forward, it's really hard to have that perspective, essentially. So part of what supports the projector and the strategy that we say for projectors is waiting for an invitation, which just means being a little bit more passive and waiting for people to recognize you and your gifts and invite you in. Because when that happens, you know that when you share your opinion, your perspective, a skill that you have, that other person is going to actually receive it and do something with it. And there's going to be some type of tangible outcome. And that is what a projector, like nothing is more fulfilling for a projector than that. 100%. Nothing is more frustrating for a projector, or as we say, nothing creates more like bitterness or resentment than telling someone what they need to do, giving someone the solution or the answer, and that person not actually doing anything with it. That's really frustrating. Okay, so now if we think about projector kids, first of all, knowing that they are designed to be inconsistent. And so you're going to notice they're going to be high energy then low energy. It's not going to be as predictable as a generator, manifesting generator child's energy is. They're going to be much better suited to one-on-one time with you, or focusing on one activity for longer periods of time, one extracurricular that they that they master. Like that is more of a projector type of jam. But also, projectors really need to feel seen and recognized. So if you have a projector child, the best thing that you can do for them is take the time to really acknowledge them. Call out what you see them doing or how you see them contributing, and celebrate that and really make them feel seen. You don't have to do this constantly, but just making that effort, like that is going to make a world of difference for this projector. And then also be very mindful around how much you are pushing or forcing them to do things that they have to exert a ton of effort to do, because again, projectors' energy is limited. So the more you force them to do things that take a lot of energy, the less they're going to be able to kind of share those gifts that come so naturally and share their perspective in the way that they're meant to.
Mm-hmm.
How does this feel, by the way, as a projector? I'm curious.
I feel so seen. I mean, I was just thinking about like, how I was talking about with the job that I had when I first got out of school, I was in a clinic and you were saying how the environment really impacts you. And it kind of feels like you just amplify that and or mirror that. And I loved that environment so much, but I was seeing 12 clients a day, 12 patients a day. And as you were talking about, taking a pause and space to reset, reflect, now that I work in my own business and I see people and I can go deep with them for an hour and a half, give or take, um, it feels so much better. And I always buffer my time and put in a 15-minute break for myself. And it's what's been working where I don't feel any of that bitterness or resentment towards anyone else.
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, that's one thing I feel like I've mastered maybe is that time management. And I notice for myself, I don't have an ADHD diagnosis at all, but I do notice for myself when I start to ping, 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 try to do, and or I don't know why I find myself these days a lot trying to check my email and ping ponging from email notification to Instagram notification. And as soon as I notice myself doing that, I'm like, okay, put everything down, go outside, take a
Yeah.
deep breath. And
Nature is so powerful, especially for these three types and for everyone, but especially for you because of that like inconsistent rhythm that you have. It's the ultimate way to reset, to kind of almost detach from all those the energetic pressure and influence that you can't help but pick up on. When you're in nature, it allows you to kind of release all of that and find your own equilibrium again, in a way.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I thank my dog for just needing to go to the bathroom or needing to stretch her legs, and we'll go on a walk together, and it feels like the best reset with where
Yeah.
we live. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
That spaciousness. I love that so much. So yes, if again, like last thing on projectors, if you have a projector child, the building in the time so that you don't have to take them from one birthday party to the next because
oh
they
my
are going
God.
to burn out. But if you think about it today, I think I mean, kids' schedules today are insane. And it's up to us as parents to also manage those a little bit. And
Mm,
I think that, yeah, going to three birthday parties in a row, that's a legitimate thing that I think actually happens a decent
on
amount these
certain
days
weekends. Yeah,
on certain
absolutely.
weekends is not going to be, again, it's not that you can't as a projector, per your point, you can be successful in a corporate environment where there are no breaks and you're seeing 12 people a day. But first of all, it's not sustainable. You won't be successful there forever because it's going to catch up with you. And second of all, it's not what's going to support you most. You're not going to be your most effective self. So you're going to be leaving something on the table and you're never going to get to that full potential when you aren't using your energy in the way that is actually more aligned for you. That's really it. It's not that you can't, it's
Mhm.
that you really don't want to because you're not going to find that fulfillment in that way.
Yeah. I mean, kind of tying everything back into like the work I do, um, pelvic health and human design, I could only do that particular clinic setting for a year and a half before my pelvic floor started screaming at me.
Yes. Yep. And the
So,
body will. Yep.
yeah,
And that's a big part, I think. I mean, it's interesting because your root, speaking of pelvic floor,
yeah.
your root center, which is obviously where also like that in the human design chart, your root center is where pressure enters the body. And so I almost see that very much as like akin to the pelvic floor. And the root center is where momentum is built. It's also what kind of manages your adrenals and your stress.
Mm.
And so yours, it's you have that center defined, which means it's like it's consistently active. So you are always feeling pressure there to get going, to get moving, to get started. But because you are a projector and you don't have that consistent sacral motor, you're not meant to actually respond to that pressure all the time. It's always going to be there, but learning to basically be able to turn that faucet on and off is really important for you. But when you're in these environments where you're just like constant pressure, and you are surrounded by those sacral motors, you're inevitably just going to respond to it constantly, consistently. And something is going to have to give at the end of the day. And the fact that you experience like the physical manifestation of that happens a lot for people.
Yeah.
So I'll just finish really quickly with the types. So we have two more. Manifestors make up, so projectors make up about 20% of the population, and manifestors make up about 9% of the population. And manifestors, so if generators are here to like generate the energy, projectors are here to guide the energy, manifestors are here to initiate. They are that initial big like boost. They're the visionaries, they're the trailblazers. They are really the ultimate creatives that create from nothing, build from scratch. I don't want to say build, that basically inspire from scratch, because the generators then kind of build that out. Manifestor energy is here to be experienced in big bursts and then kind of big dips, if you will. So it's also inconsistent like projectors, but more intensely so. So manifestors will typically get these urges, these like they come out of nowhere, and they can either be driven by emotions or they can be driven by like intuitive urges that just drop in, and they tell these manifestors, go do this, start this company, fly to Bali, right? Like it's those like urges that feel almost like overwhelming and very urgent. And in those moments, around those urges, manifestors get so much energy. There's this huge buildup of momentum where they can literally move mountains, because they are here to be like, to start movements. And so around that urge, they're going to feel all this momentum building, and then they're going to be so creative. And then that's all going to disappear once the thing is off the ground, and they're going to feel exhausted and depleted. And it's so important for manifestors to honor that rest cycle just as much as they honor the kind of like high. But again, because 70% of the world is a generator or manifesting generator, everything is built around this idea of consistency, and that consistency is better. And so 9 to 5 work days, even school days, and like the school year and the schedule, like you can see how that works really well for generator and manifesting generator kids, does not work well for projectors or manifestors. Manifestors are also just naturally as kids incredibly independent, because they need to be, right? Manifestors, because they're here to initiate new things that don't exist yet, manifestors have what we call a repelling aura. I actually like to rebrand it as a protective aura, in the sense that they are meant to tune out the world so that they can honor that creative urge. Because if they pay too much attention to what other people think and whether other people agree, they're going to dilute their vision or their message, or they're going to compromise on it, and they're not going to be able to fulfill that purpose of initiating the newness, because they're going to be so overly concerned with people pleasing. And in kids, that can sometimes come across as like, whoa, that child it triggers people. It triggers people to sometimes be around manifestors, because they are so self-sufficient. They know what they want, and they are here to, their strategy is really to inform. So they are here to just tell people what they want and what needs to happen and where they're going. They're not here to ask for permission. They're not here to get your feedback. And again, when you have children who aren't conditioned out of that yet, and who are just like honoring that internal kind of guidance, this can be, you can imagine in a school setting or even in a family setting, like it's a little bit confrontational in a way. And parents, because they love their child so much and want to protect their child, they will often shut that down. They'll tell their child, oh, you can't just say what you want, sweetie. You've got to ask other people, or you've got to put it in a polite way. And so when I meet manifestors as adults, most of them are like shells of the person that they're designed to be, because they've been told for so long to kind of play it small and that they were too much. And so they've been completely conditioned out of trusting those urges. And all they do is ask for permission and look for, agreement and validation from the outside. So if you have a manifestor child, know that yes, they are going to be maybe a more challenging child in some ways, but really what they crave most is freedom. So what a projector craves most is being seen and recognized. What a manifestor child craves most is freedom. And so even if you need to limit them in some ways to protect them, try and always, every time you set a boundary, try and give them another type of freedom. Try and give them, and really be mindful of, am I setting this boundary because it's actually necessary or because I think I should? Because so much of parenting comes down to, oh, but that's what, this expert on the podcast said I should do. And this is, and I think with manifestors, they are designed to challenge that. And so the best thing you can do is challenge yourself a little bit more and ask yourself, like, do I really think this is necessary? And am I doing this for the right reasons? Or can I trust my child to know when enough is enough, or to know how to move through the world? And can I also trust that the right people are going to recognize my child's power and not feel intimidated by it? And maybe that's not my fight to fight on their behalf. And maybe I don't need to protect them. Maybe it's better that they learn that lesson now and learn to build confidence in themselves, regardless of what the world around them thinks or does or how they respond.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, we've got reflectors, and they're like our little unicorn snowflakes. They're the 1%. Reflectors are these like magical, hypersensitive beings. Reflectors are really what the name suggests. Reflectors are here to constantly reflect the world around them. And as such, they are here to be our, almost like our gauge for how we're doing as in a family, how we're doing as a family, in a society, how we're doing in a society. They are the truth tellers. They are the people who feel everything. They are so hyper attuned to their environment that they have the potential to be the wisest among all of us. However, if they don't learn to manage that sensitivity, they can also become so overwhelmed by feeling everything and so confused because they're like, wait, I was so happy and now I'm so sad. And they don't realize it's because they are reflecting the world around them. They think something's going on inside of them, but really all they're doing is just like constantly providing a mirror for all of us. So for reflectors, it's really important for them to be able to just learn to be in the moment, to be super present, and not to make a certain sensation that they experience mean anything beyond like something that they are just allowing to come through because they are mirroring what's going on around them. If they are super present, they are going to be the people who say exactly what needs to be said when it needs to be said, who know exactly when to give someone a hug because they feel this person needs it, right? They can speak truth. They can cut through all the BS and say exactly, what is actually going on. So they're these very magical beings, but they're also often quite misunderstood because they change and evolve so much from moment to moment. And the key for reflectors is really environment and making sure that they are in the spaces and surrounded by people where they feel really good and comfortable. Because when they are not, when they're in spaces where they feel pressure to be something else or do something else, it's going to really affect their like nervous system and their health because they are so hypersensitive. Reflectors are often the people who suffer from a lot of like autoimmune diseases because it's basically all stored stuff that they don't know what to do with and how to release. And it's really all environmentally driven. So those are all the types. And these last three types, just to close the loop on sleep, these last three types, because like I said, they're so sensitive, just general, their energy is very sensitive to environment. For these types, it is actually good to do some priming down at the end of the day. So for these types, you do want to kind of lower the lights. You want to get them maybe upstairs a little bit earlier than you normally would and start to kind of wind down. You might want to do like a bath at night and maybe put some like lavender in there to kind of like get their nervous system to calm down. You might want to eat earlier, and you really need to have a consistent bedtime with this group. And it doesn't, even if they're not tired, getting used to just getting into bed, because they don't know how tired they are until literally they're lying down. And 5 minutes later, they're like, wow, I'm exhausted. But they won't know until that very last minute. And so being consistent with getting them in bed at a certain time, and then maybe allowing them to read a book or listen to a Tony story or whatever it might be, it's almost like you need to give them a chance to actually sit in their own aura and really allow themselves to recalibrate and figure out, like, where am I on that tiredness spectrum? Because they won't actually know. And they can easily, like, my husband is a projector, and I joke, it's like he either goes to bed at 2 a.m. because he's like so excited, like he's working on something, or he's watching shows and he like can't turn it off. Or he goes to bed at 8 p.m. because he's so exhausted. It's like, it's that range.
That is my boyfriend too. He's also a projector. And same thing. Some days I'll find him, if I'm getting home late, on the couch passed out because he was just watching something, but it's like late. Or he's like, tonight I'm going to bed at 8 and that's
Yep.
it. I'm done.
Yep. Exactly.
I'm so impressed, Alexandra, how you just close the loop on all 5 of those energy types and the sleep, and how you can see that in children. That was amazing. I feel like you did channel just all of that so
I
beautifully.
blacked out, but I also love this so much. And this is what I, breathe every day. So
Yeah.
we only touch the tip of the iceberg, but hopefully that was at least a little bit helpful in sketching out those different types and how they show up in the world.
I mean, I absolutely feel like yes, that was touching the tip of the iceberg that I feel like is accessible enough for people to be like, maybe I can apply some of these little tips. But also, if someone was more interested in diving really deep into their design with you or about their child's design with you, what's kind of the map that you'd maybe lay out for them?
I would say, from with kids, I created a little report called the Raised by Design report, which is basically like a 20-page high-level summary of your child's design. And when I created it, I was very aware of the fact that, especially at this time, this is a few years ago, very few people had heard of human design. And
Right.
Even if there was one parent who had, the other parent was definitely not into it or skeptical of it. So I wrote these reports in a way that I call as like partner proof, in the sense that it's very like jargon free. So it's
Ah.
focused on like, this is like, let's say the energy type, like, your child is a generator, but it actually describes like, okay, this is how that shows up in the world. And this is how you know when they need to rest. And this is how you know that they're, not on track and they need some support. And this is how they sleep, for example. And then it also gives you very specific tactical suggestions on how to support them. But it goes into much more than energy type. It covers kind of all the basics. So that's a really helpful place to start if you want to learn more about your child's design. If you want to learn more about your own design, I do one-on-one sessions. They tend to book up pretty quickly, so I apologize in advance. But I also have something called my Well by Design report, which might be especially interesting for your audience, because it goes into the parts of your design that speak to kind of well-being and how to support and nourish your body, mind, and spirit in the way that is, again, most supportive for you, because the whole premise of human design is there's no way that all like 8 billion of us are designed to benefit from the same diet. Like, there's just no way.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Biggest
this
homogenizing
report,
factor, right?
I know. So this report it gives you more insight from a human design perspective on how to support your personal well-being. So one of those two avenues would probably be the best place to start, but also I share so much on my Instagram, and I have an amazing community, which is for the people who really are like, okay, I'm bought in. And for community members, I basically share a masterclass every week and an experiment for people to run in their own lives. So it's kind of like really learning to embody your design one experiment at a time.
I love that. And actually, when Sam mentioned you and how we were talking about the embodied woman and then taking action in the future for hopefully more embodied children, and she was like, yeah, you need to talk to my friend. And I checked out your Instagram page and it floored me. I was like, all of the little scenarios that you had explained in a quite a few different capacities. Like we're, for example, talking about parenting and children, but there's so many other ways that you can utilize your design. Like I love looking at it in terms of business, of course, and purpose and just living your fully expressed life. So I really appreciate that aspect of your Instagram. It is so full of
Oh,
knowledge, like
thank you.
amazing. And that's the
I love
gift of the
creating content.
generator. Yeah, that's the
Well, I
gift.
think it's the gift and the curse because I just like create. And there's like never enough hours in a day because I just wish I could, even do so much more.
Right, right. Or at least, I wonder if you have a projector in your business at all helping you guide the energy or like put it all
My husband,
together. Ah, well, duh.
who's
Yes.
always like, there's no strategy to this, Alexandra. You just keep posting. And I'm like, I know, but I just want to share.
But it's so fun. Yes, yes. Oh my gosh. Well, holy smokes. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Obviously your knowledge and your embodied wisdom is so felt here. And I will put all of those things that you just mentioned in the show notes so that people can reach you, find you, and work with you. Thank you again just for being here.
Thank you so much for having me and sharing me.
Yes, of course. To all you listening, go hit her up. I promise you will not be disappointed.